On a bright Saturday morning, the sun was shining gently over the quiet neighborhood. Birds were chirping, and there was a soft breeze that made the trees sway slowly. People were out walking their dogs or tending to their gardens, and it all seemed calm and ordinary. Among the residents, one woman was making her usual morning walk. She had a strong presence, a quiet confidence that made people notice her without her even trying. Her dog, a large and sturdy animal, walked beside her with perfect obedience, its leash loose in her hand. The woman loved her morning walks. It was her time to think, enjoy the air, and let her dog stretch its legs. She had lived in this neighborhood for several years and knew most of the people. She had a routine, and she liked it that way. Her life was simple but meaningful. She worked hard, cared for her dog, and had a few close friends she trusted. On this particular morning, she noticed the smell of fresh grass and the sound of children laughing as they played down the street. Everything seemed normal, peaceful even. Meanwhile, not far from her, a group of men known in the neighborhood for causing trouble was hanging around. They had been up to mischief for years, often harassing residents and making people feel unsafe. They were loud, rough, and overconfident, always believing they could get away with their actions. On this day, they noticed the woman walking her dog and decided she looked like an easy target. They laughed among themselves, making crude jokes and underestimating the situation completely. They had no idea who she really was. As the woman continued her walk, she felt the usual comfort of her routine. She enjoyed the rhythm of her steps and the way her dog kept pace perfectly beside her. The dog was not only her companion but also a guardian, and she trusted it completely. They had a bond that went beyond words. The dog had been trained well, and it understood her commands without hesitation. People often commented on how calm and obedient it was. But they didn't know the dog's loyalty was unmatched when it sensed danger. The gang, seeing her from a distance, started to approach. They moved casually at first, pretending to be relaxed, but their eyes followed every step she took. They whispered to each other, thinking about how easy it would be to scare her, to make her afraid. They had done this to others before and expected the same reaction. But the woman remained unaware of them at first, focused on her walk and the gentle morning around her. As the distance closed, the atmosphere began to change. The dog sensed it immediately. Its ears perked up, and it started walking a little closer to her, staying alert. The woman noticed the shift but didn't panic. She had learned over time to read her dog's signals, and she knew when something was off. Her heart rate increased slightly, but she kept her movements calm, not wanting to show fear. The gang reached her side, and their mocking voices broke the morning calm. They shouted insults and tried to provoke her. The woman stopped and looked at them, her expression calm but firm. She didn't speak immediately. She let them see that she was not scared. Her dog, now standing alert, growled softly, a warning that it was ready to protect her if needed. The men were surprised by her composure. Most people would have panicked, stepped aside, or tried to avoid confrontation. But she didn't move. She stood tall, facing them with unwavering confidence. Her presence alone started to unsettle them. The dog barked once, low and controlled, and the men instinctively took a small step back. They hadn't expected this reaction. They had underestimated her. She finally spoke, her voice calm but commanding. She told them to leave her alone. There was no anger, no aggression, just a firm statement of boundaries. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. The gang laughed nervously, trying to cover their surprise, but their confidence was beginning to falter. They had assumed she would be easy to intimidate, but she was showing them otherwise. The woman took a step forward, her dog moving with her, a perfect partner in their silent coordination. She didn't need to shout or threaten. Her calm authority and the dog's presence were enough to make the gang pause. They were confused, not used to this kind of reaction. The morning that had seemed ordinary was now charged with tension. People passing by noticed the scene, but kept their distance. Sensing that something serious might happen, the gang tried again, moving closer and speaking louder, hoping to assert control, but the woman remained steady. She understood how to handle such situations without escalating them unnecessarily. Her eyes never wavered from theirs, and she subtly signaled her dog to stay alert. The dog responded instantly, its body tense but controlled, ready to defend her if the need arose. The street seemed to hold its breath. The usual morning sounds, the birds, the children, the breeze were still there, but everything felt sharper, more intense. The gang was realizing that they had made a mistake. The woman was not afraid, and her dog was more than just a pet. It was a loyal protector. They had assumed this would be an easy intimidation, but the reality was very different. She continued to walk slowly, her movements deliberate and calm. The gang hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Every instinct they had about controlling people was being challenged. The dog growled again, low and steady, and the gang finally understood that this was not the moment to act recklessly. The woman's quiet confidence and the dog's loyalty had shifted the power dynamic completely by now. The tension was palpable, but the woman kept her composure. She knew that fear would only encourage them, so she maintained her calm demeanor. Her voice when she spoke again was clear and firm, setting boundaries without anger. She didn't threaten, didn't escalate, and yet her authority was undeniable. The gang looked at each other, realizing that they had underestimated her. They had chosen the wrong person to intimidate. People in nearby houses started to peek from their windows. Some quietly made calls just in case, sensing that the situation could turn dangerous. But the woman remained focused, her eyes scanning the surroundings calmly. She trusted her dog completely and trusted her own ability to navigate the moment without losing control. The gang, still trying to regain their confidence, made small movements as if to threaten her. But the dog was ready. It barked sharply, more insistently this time, showing that it was prepared to protect her at any cost. The woman didn't flinch. She had prepared for moments like this mentally many times before. Life had taught her to stay calm under pressure and to rely on her instincts and the loyalty of those who truly cared for her, including her dog. As the tension continued, the gang slowly began to realize the full extent of their mistake. Their attempts to intimidate her were failing. The woman's calm, unwavering demeanor and the presence of her dog were making them uneasy. For the first time, they felt vulnerable, uncertain of what might happen next. They had expected fear, but they were met with strength and loyalty instead. The woman continued walking, never rushing, never panicking. Her steps were measured, and she stayed close to her dog, showing unity and trust. Every movement communicated control and confidence. The gang could feel it, even if they didn't fully understand it yet. They were facing someone who would not be easily shaken. Someone whose loyalty to her companion was unmatched, and someone whose courage was not to be underestimated. By the end of the walk down that block, the gang was visibly frustrated and unsure of what to do. They had assumed the morning would be easy, filled with laughter at someone else's expense. Instead, it had turned into a lesson in humility. The woman and her dog had faced them without fear, and their confidence had begun to crumble. The sun continued to shine. The birds kept singing and life in the neighborhood moved on. But for those who had witnessed the encounter, it was clear that appearances could be deceiving. The quiet woman walking her dog was far stronger and more courageous than anyone had guessed. And the loyalty of her dog had been a powerful reminder that true strength often comes from unity, trust, and the courage to face challenges head-on. That morning marked the beginning of a story that would later be talked about by neighbors for years. It was a story not about violence, but about courage, loyalty, and the importance of standing firm in the face of intimidation. The gang had made a mistake by underestimating someone they thought would be easy to scare, and the lesson they learned would stay with them long after the sun had set on that quiet neighborhood. The morning had grown brighter, and the streets were alive with the usual sounds of life. People were starting their day, some heading to work, others enjoying a peaceful walk. The woman continued her path, her dog alert and walking closely beside her. The memory of the gang's initial approach still lingered in her mind, but she didn't let it shake her. She had been in situations before where she needed to stay calm under pressure, and she trusted her instincts completely. The gang, on the other hand, had regrouped nearby. Their earlier attempt to intimidate her had failed, and frustration began to grow among them. They whispered to each other, trying to plan their next move. They believed that she had been lucky, that her calmness was nothing more than hesitation or fear hidden behind a facade. They didn't yet realize that she was fully aware, fully prepared, and fully capable of handling whatever they tried next. The woman noticed subtle signs that someone was following her. She looked over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the street without making it obvious. She didn't panic. She had been trained to notice body language, to recognize threats before they escalated. Her dog walked at her side, sensing her alertness and reacting accordingly. The bond between them was evident. They moved in harmony, each aware of the other's intentions. As they continued walking, the gang began to close in again. This time, they were bolder, thinking that a show of strength would intimidate her. They started making loud comments, trying to provoke a reaction. But the woman remained composed. She slowed her pace slightly, keeping her dog close, and observed their movements carefully. She was calculating, thinking ahead, and ready to respond in a way that would protect both herself and her dog. The dog's instincts were sharp. It could sense the tension in the gang's voices, the shift in their posture, the subtle signals that humans often missed. It growled softly, a warning that it was aware and ready. The woman responded with a calm, firm voice, telling them again to leave her alone. She didn't shout or threaten, but there was a weight to her words that demanded attention. The gang paused, surprised by her confidence and the unwavering presence of her dog. The street around them seemed too quiet. Neighbors noticed the tension and watched from a distance, curious and concerned. The gang tried to regain control, moving closer with small, threatening steps. The woman didn't flinch. She knew that showing fear would only encourage them, so she maintained her calm, steady stance. Her dog mirrored her confidence, moving with purpose, ears alert. Muscles tense but controlled. The gang underestimated the woman once again. They thought that her calmness was a weakness, that she would eventually react with fear or panic. But she was far from powerless. She had lived through challenges that demanded courage and resilience. Every step she took was deliberate, every movement calculated, ensuring that she remained safe while assessing the gang's intentions. She knew that strength didn't always come from confrontation. Sometimes it came from composure and strategy. As the gang approached, the dog took a step forward, positioning itself slightly ahead of the woman. It was a protective stance, signaling to the gang that any misstep would be met with immediate defense. The woman's calm eyes met theirs, unflinching, showing that she was ready for whatever came next. The gang hesitated, realizing that they had misjudged her. Their overconfidence began to falter. One of the gang members made a sudden move, stepping closer in an attempt to intimidate her. The dog reacted instantly, barking loudly and snapping its teeth in a controlled manner. The sound was sharp and commanding, and the gang immediately took a step back. The woman didn't need to intervene. Her dog's loyalty and training were enough to send a clear message. They were dealing with someone who would not be easily controlled. The woman continued to speak calmly, her voice carrying authority. She reminded them to leave her alone and emphasized that she would not tolerate threats. The gang, feeling the shift in power, became uneasy. They had underestimated both her presence and her companion. The situation that had begun as an attempt to intimidate had transformed into a lesson for them, though they were slow to realize it. As the tension grew, the dog remained vigilant. Its eyes never left the gang, its body ready to respond at a moment's notice. The woman's movements were subtle but deliberate, keeping the dog close while maintaining a calm demeanor. She didn't need to rush or panic. She knew that control and patience were her strongest allies in this situation. The gang began to exchange nervous glances, whispering to each other. They were unsure of how to proceed, realizing that their previous methods of intimidation were ineffective. The woman and her dog had turned the dynamic completely. What they had thought would be an easy encounter was now a challenge that exposed their own weaknesses. Neighbors, observing from a safe distance, started to feel a sense of admiration for the woman. They could see the courage and calm determination in her actions. She was not just protecting herself. She was setting an example of how to stand firm in the face of intimidation. Her dog, loyal and vigilant. was a testament to the bond they shared and the strength that came from trust and training. The gang made another attempt to assert control, but each move was met with calm resistance. The woman's presence and her dog's protective stance made it clear that any aggression would be met with immediate consequences. The gang began to realize that they were dealing with someone far more capable than they had imagined. Their initial confidence began to waver, placed by uncertainty and unease. The woman continued her walk, her steps measured and deliberate. She kept her dog close, ensuring that it was ready to respond if necessary. The gang followed at a distance, still trying to maintain a sense of authority, but their actions were clumsy and ineffective. They had misjudged her entirely. The reality of the situation was beginning to dawn on them. The dog, sensing the tension, barked intermittently, reminding the gang of its readiness. The woman's calm demeanor and the dog's loyalty created a dynamic that the gang could not control. They were no longer the ones holding power. The woman and her companion had shifted the balance. The street, once ordinary and peaceful, was now a scene of quiet confrontation. With the woman's courage at the center, as the morning progressed, the gang realized that their attempts to intimidate were futile. The woman's strategy of calm resistance, combined with her dog's protective instincts, had rendered their efforts meaningless. They were forced to reconsider their actions, recognizing that they had underestimated someone who was prepared, aware, and courageous. The woman and her dog continued their walk, never hurrying, never panicking. They moved with purpose, each step reinforcing their confidence and control. The gang, increasingly frustrated and unsure, began to retreat slightly, understanding that this encounter was not going as they had expected. The lesson was clear: underestimating someone, based on appearances, could lead to consequences they had not anticipated. Neighbors watched as the tension gradually eased. The woman had faced the gang without aggression, relying on her composure and the loyalty of her dog. The encounter had not escalated into violence, yet it had conveyed a powerful message about courage, preparedness, and the strength that comes from unity. The woman's calm and deliberate actions had transformed what could have been a dangerous situation into a demonstration of resilience and authority. By the time the walk continued to the end of the block, the gang had learned a valuable lesson. Their confidence had been shaken, and their assumptions about the woman had been proven wrong. The woman and her dog had turned what seemed like a moment of vulnerability into a display of strength and control. The neighborhood, which had watched quietly from their homes, had witnessed a story of courage and loyalty that would be remembered. The morning carried on, the sun shining brighter, the sounds of life returning to normal. The woman and her dog walked with steady confidence, having faced a threat with calm determination. The gang, humbled and uncertain, moved away, recognizing that they had encountered someone far more formidable than they had anticipated. The bond between the woman and her dog, the trust and loyalty they shared, had made all the difference. This morning, ordinary to some, had become extraordinary for those who witnessed it. The woman's courage, combined with the dog's unwavering loyalty, had turned a potential confrontation into a story of strength and resilience. The neighborhood had been reminded that appearances could be deceiving, and that true courage often comes from calm confidence, preparation, and the loyalty of those who stand beside you. The morning had turned warmer, and the sun was now high enough to cast long shadows along the quiet streets. People were beginning to move about more freely, enjoying the calm of a neighborhood that rarely saw real trouble. The woman continued her walk, her dog close by, both moving with a sense of ease and confidence. She had learned to remain aware of her surroundings without letting tension control her. Her dog, equally alert, mirrored her calm vigilance, ready to respond to any situation. The gang, still nearby, had not given up. Their initial attempts to intimidate her had failed. Rather than retreat, they began to think of new ways to assert themselves. Their overconfidence made them reckless. They whispered among themselves, plotting subtle moves, hoping to catch her off guard. They thought that if they could isolate her, they might regain control. But what they did not know was that she was more prepared and far more resourceful than they imagined. The woman noticed their movements from the corner of her eye. She adjusted her pace, slowing slightly, keeping her dog close and calm. She understood the psychology of intimidation, and she knew that showing fear would only give the gang power. Her dog sensed the shift in energy and stayed alert, its body language signaling readiness without aggression. The bond between them was strong. They communicated without words, each understanding the other completely. The gang started moving again, taking steps to surround her. Their whispers turned into low threats, but the woman did not react with anger or fear. She maintained a steady rhythm, each step measured and deliberate. Her calmness was unsettling to the gang, who had expected panic or hesitation. Her dog, loyal and protective, moved with perfect timing beside her, eyes scanning the street, muscles ready to spring if necessary. The woman took a deep breath, centering herself. She knew that any sudden reaction could escalate the situation, but patience and control were her allies. Her eyes met the gang members, not with hatred, but with quiet strength. She didn't need to shout or threaten. Her presence alone, combined with her dog's alertness, communicated a clear message. She was not someone to be underestimated. One of the gang members stepped forward, trying to intimidate her with aggressive gestures. The dog reacted immediately, stepping slightly in front of her and letting out a controlled growl. The sound was firm and commanding, and it caused the man to pause, reconsidering his actions. The woman, sensing the opportunity, spoke calmly, telling them to leave her alone. Her voice was steady, filled with authority that did not require anger or aggression. The gang, confused by her composure and the dog's readiness, hesitated. The woman continued walking, her movements smooth and confident. She kept her dog close, ensuring that it remained protective but not aggressive. Every step was deliberate, every glance calculated. She was aware of the gang's positioning and used her surroundings strategically. Trees, parked cars, and the street layout were all tools she could use to maintain control without escalating the situation. Her training and experience in handling difficult encounters gave her an advantage that the gang had not anticipated. The gang tried another approach, speaking louder and moving more aggressively, but each attempt was met with calm resistance. The woman's dog barked intermittently, a warning that any reckless move would have consequences. She maintained her composure, never rushing, never panicking. Her ability to stay centered in the midst of tension began to frustrate the gang. They had expected fear, hesitation, or confusion, but found none. The woman's movements became more strategic. She positioned herself so that the gang could not easily surround her. Her dog stayed close, adjusting its position to ensure maximum protection. She used subtle body language, slight shifts in stance, and measured steps to communicate control. The gang, noticing the careful coordination between her and her dog, started to lose confidence. Their assumptions about her had been completely wrong. Neighbors, aware of the ongoing situation, watched from windows and doorways. Some whispered to each other, impressed by her courage and composure. Others quietly prepared to intervene if things escalated, though they trusted that her calm demeanor would prevent violence. The woman and her dog had created a barrier of confidence and readiness that even the gang could not easily penetrate. The gang's frustration grew. They tried to move closer, thinking that overwhelming her presence might force a reaction. But the woman's calmness and her dog's alert stance made them hesitate. The situation that they had assumed would be simple had become complicated. Their confidence began to crack under the weight of her composure and the loyalty of her dog. Each attempt they made to regain control was met with strategic resistance. The dog, sensing the gang's growing uncertainty, continued to position itself protectively. Its growls became more pronounced, not threatening but clear, signaling that it was prepared to defend its owner at a moment's notice. The woman's calm eyes met theirs, conveying strength without aggression. She didn't need to speak loudly or make threats. Her composure, combined with her dog's presence, created a psychological barrier the gang could not overcome. The woman began to use subtle maneuvers, adjusting her position and guiding her dog with gentle commands. She was not rushing, but her movements were deliberate, showing that she was in control of both her environment and her companion. The gang, attempting to assert themselves, found that each step they took was countered by her calm strategy. They were unprepared for this level of awareness and discipline. As the encounter continued, the gang realized that their initial assumptions were entirely wrong. The woman's calm strength and her dog's loyalty were more than just obstacles. They were forces that challenged the gang's confidence and authority. Each man in the group felt the growing tension, recognizing that intimidation would not work here. Their overconfidence had been misplaced, and the reality of the situation was beginning to sink in. The woman continued to walk slowly, each step reinforcing her control. Her dog stayed close, responding to subtle commands, creating a dynamic that the gang could not predict or manage. The street seemed to hold its breath as the confrontation played out without violence, relying instead on presence, strategy, and loyalty. The gang's frustration grew, but their attempts to act recklessly were tempered by the clear message that this woman was not to be trifled with. Neighbors observed quietly, noticing the calm authority with which she navigated the situation. Her actions were deliberate and human-centric, showing courage without aggression. The loyalty of her dog was evident, a living symbol of trust and protection. The gang, increasingly aware of their misjudgment, began to retreat mentally, realizing that they were facing someone who had not only prepared for this encounter, but had anticipated their every move. The woman maintained her composure, her steps measured, her voice calm and firm when necessary. Her dog remained alert but under control, a perfect partner in the silent coordination of strategy and defense. The gang's attempts to regain dominance continued to falter. Each move they made was met with calm resistance, reinforcing the lesson that appearances could be deceiving and that true strength often comes from composure and loyalty. By now, the gang had grown increasingly uneasy. Their previous confidence had been replaced by uncertainty. The woman's calm, strategic presence and the dog's protective loyalty had shifted the power entirely. What they had assumed would be an easy encounter had become a lesson in humility. The street, once quiet and ordinary, was now the setting of a story in courage and resilience. The woman continued her path down the street, never hurried, never panicked. Her dog walked beside her, alert and loyal, responding to every subtle signal. The gang, frustrated and confused, slowly began to retreat. They had underestimated someone who seemed ordinary at first glance, but was far from it. The lesson they learned would remain with them, a reminder that appearances could be deceiving and that true strength often came quietly, with patience, strategy, and unwavering loyalty. The morning continued with the sun shining brightly and life returning to its usual rhythm. The woman and her dog walked steadily, having faced intimidation without aggression. Relying on calm strategy and mutual trust, the gang moved away, humbled and aware of their misjudgment. The neighborhood, witnessing the encounter, had learned a powerful lesson about courage, loyalty, and the strength found in calm composure and strategic thinking. This encounter, though it lasted only a short while, had left a lasting impression. The woman's quiet strength and her dog's loyalty had created a story that neighbors would remember. A story of human courage and the bond between a person and their companion. The gang had been taught that underestimating someone based on appearances could lead to consequences they had not anticipated. And for the woman and her dog, the morning had reinforced a truth they both already knew. Together, they were stronger than anyone could imagine. The morning was now fully alive with sounds of everyday life. Children were playing in the yards, neighbors tended to their gardens, and the sunlight fell warmly on the quiet streets. The woman continued her walk, her dog by her side, moving with a rhythm that seemed unshakable. The previous encounters with the gang had tested her patience and composure, but she had stayed calm, confident in her awareness and in the loyalty of her dog. The gang, on the other hand, was feeling more frustrated than ever. Their attempts to intimidate her had been met with quiet confidence and careful strategy. Each time they thought they had an advantage, the woman and her dog adjusted seamlessly, maintaining control. They had assumed that fear would appear even for a moment, but they found none. The woman was steady, strategic, and calm, and the dog's presence made any rash move impossible. The woman noticed subtle cues in the gang's behavior, their body language, the way they whispered to one another, Small glances they threw her way all indicated that they were uncertain and losing their nerve. She adjusted her pace slightly, ensuring that her dog stayed close and alert. She had learned to interpret both human and animal behavior, understanding when a situation might escalate and when calm patience could prevent it. The dog remained an unwavering partner, sensing every shift in tension and reacting appropriately. Its movements were precise, protective, but not aggressive, communicating clearly that the woman was not alone and that any attempt to intimidate her further would have consequences. The bond between them was evident, unspoken but powerful. The woman relied on her dog as much as the dog relied on her, a seamless team moving through a difficult situation. The gang attempted another approach. They tried to surround her once more, speaking louder and gesturing threateningly. But the woman remained composed, her eyes calm and steady. She did not rush, did not panic, and did not raise her voice. Her dog mirrored her composure, moving in perfect harmony, ears perked and muscles tense. Ready to respond? The gang felt the weight of their miscalculation. Their confidence was waning, replaced by unease. The woman took careful steps, subtly positioning herself in a way that minimized their options. She used the environment, trees, fences, parked cars, as natural barriers, guiding her dog in a way that ensured they could control the space around them without escalating the situation. Her movements were quiet but deliberate, demonstrating awareness and calm authority. The gang, trying to find a weakness, began to feel trapped by their own assumptions and the woman's strategy. The dog growled softly, a warning that it was ready to defend its owner if needed. The gang took a step back, unsure of how to proceed. The woman's calm, steady presence and the dog's alertness created a psychological barrier they could not breach. Her voice, when she spoke, was firm and unshakable. She told them once more to leave her alone, her tone clear, assertive, and unafraid. There was no anger, no threat, just the confidence of someone who would not be intimidated. Neighbors had begun to notice the encounter. They watched quietly from windows and porches, sensing the tension, but also recognizing the courage and composure of the woman and the loyalty of her dog. No one wanted to intervene unnecessarily, but everyone could see the lesson unfolding in real time. The gang's overconfidence had been met with resilience and strategy, a reminder that appearances could be deceiving. The gang tried again to intimidate her, moving closer in a more aggressive stance, but every action was met with calm resistance. The woman adjusted her position, subtly guiding her dog to maintain a protective stance without aggression. Her steps were slow and measured, demonstrating patience and confidence. The dog mirrored her every movement, a silent partner, ready for action if necessary. The gang's uncertainty grew, their frustration mounting. They had underestimated her, and now they were unsure of how to proceed. The woman observed the environment carefully. She knew where she could move safely and how to maintain distance from the gang without showing fear. Her dog, trained and loyal, responded instantly to her subtle commands. They moved together as one, a seamless team of calm awareness and readiness. The gang, noticing the coordination and control, began to lose the psychological advantage they had assumed they held. The street, once ordinary and quiet, now held the tension of a standoff. The gang was frustrated and hesitant. They had misjudged the woman's strength and the loyalty of her dog. The woman, meanwhile, walked with purpose and awareness, maintaining a calm demeanor that highlighted her control over the situation. Her dog's presence reinforced the message. She was prepared, aware, and not to be underestimated. The gang, increasingly aware of their miscalculation, began to retreat slightly. They were no longer confident, no longer certain. The woman and her dog had turned what could have been a simple act of intimidation into a demonstration of strategy, patience, and loyalty. The dog's growls, protective stance, and readiness made it clear that any attempt to escalate would be met with immediate consequences. The gang could see that their assumptions had been completely wrong. The woman continued her walk, her steps calm and measured. She did not hurry, she did not panic. Her dog stayed alert but obedient, moving with perfect synchronization. The gang's frustration was evident, but they could not act recklessly without risking consequences they were not prepared to face. The woman's calm authority and her dog's loyalty had created a situation where control had shifted entirely to them. Neighbors continued to observe, recognizing the courage, strategy, and human-centered approach of the woman. She had faced intimidation without aggression, relying on awareness, patience, and the bond with her dog. The gang's confidence had been shaken completely. Their overconfidence had led them to underestimate someone whose strength and composure were far beyond what they expected. The woman and her dog moved down the street, continuing their walk as if nothing had happened, but their presence spoke volumes. The gang, humbled and frustrated, retreated further, understanding that they had been outmatched not by brute force but by calm, strategic action and loyalty. The street returned to its usual rhythm, but the lesson remained clear. Appearances could be deceiving, and underestimating someone could have consequences. The dog, loyal and attentive, stayed close to the woman. Their bond had proven itself in the face of potential threat, demonstrating trust, coordination, and courage. The woman continued her path with confidence, never hurried, never panicked. The gang had been forced to acknowledge that they had picked the wrong target, someone far stronger than they had anticipated. By the end of the morning, the woman had completed her walk without any escalation to violence. Her calm demeanor, strategic thinking, and the loyalty of her dog had transformed a potential confrontation into a demonstration of resilience and strength. Neighbors who witnessed the encounter would remember it for a long time. A story of courage and composure, of the bond between a person and their companion, and of the lesson learned by those who underestimated them. The sun continued to shine, and life in the neighborhood resumed its normal pace. The gang, humbled by their experience, moved away, their overconfidence corrected by the reality of the woman's strength. The woman and her dog had walked not just through a street, but through a challenge that tested their calmness, awareness, and loyalty. The story of that morning would remain in the neighborhood as a lesson in courage, patience, and the power of unity between a human and their loyal companion. The afternoon had settled into a warm, peaceful rhythm. Sunlight filled the streets, casting gentle shadows on the sidewalks. In the usual neighborhood sounds, birds chirping, distant children laughing, and the occasional passing car created a sense of normalcy. Yet the memory of the morning lingered. The encounter with the gang had tested patience, courage, and awareness, and though the danger had passed, the lessons from the experience were still fresh. The woman continued her walk, the rhythm of her steps calm and measured. Her dog stayed close, its movements steady and alert. Every so often she glanced around, aware of her surroundings without showing any hint of anxiety. Her composure had been her greatest asset throughout the morning. She knew that true strength did not always come from physical confrontation, but from presence, strategy, and careful observation. The gang had retreated, frustrated and humbled. Their overconfidence had been challenged. They were left to reflect on the mistake of underestimating someone based on appearances. The woman's calmness, her strategic awareness, and the loyalty of her dog had created a dynamic they could not control. Even from a distance, they realized the lesson of the morning. Intimidation could fail when faced with composure, intelligence, and courage. The woman's dog, loyal and protective, remained alert. It had sensed every subtle movement of the gang, responded to every shift in tension, and stayed perfectly synchronized with her commands. The bond between them was clear and evident to anyone watching. It was not just obedience. It was mutual trust, awareness, and shared understanding. This partnership had turned the morning's potential threat into a demonstration of strength. Without a single act of aggression, as they continued walking, neighbors peeked from their windows or stepped slightly outside. Still curious about the events earlier in the morning, some whispered to each other about the woman's courage, noting how she had handled the situation without escalating it. Others admired the dog's loyalty, understanding that it had played a crucial role in maintaining calm and order. The neighborhood had witnessed a lesson in courage, composure, and the strength that comes from trust. The woman adjusted her path slightly, choosing streets and sidewalks that provided a sense of openness and visibility. She understood the importance of space and sightlines when dealing with potential threats. Her dog stayed close, following subtle cues from her movements. Together, they navigated the neighborhood as a team, perfectly in sync, calm yet alert. The psychological effect on the gang, should they choose to approach again, had already been profound. Even at a distance, the woman and her dog exuded strength and readiness. The gang, meanwhile, gathered in a nearby area to discuss the morning's events. Their conversation was hushed, their usual confidence replaced with doubt and uncertainty. They had expected to intimidate easily, but they had misjudged the woman's abilities and the loyalty of her companion. Each of them reflected on their own assumptions, realizing that appearances could be deceptive and that true strength might be quiet, composed, and unpredictable. The woman noticed no direct threat as she walked, but she stayed aware. Her training in reading subtle body language and situational cues allowed her to remain prepared without tension. Her dog's movements reinforced this awareness. It stayed close, attentive, and ready, responding instantly to her subtle commands. The balance between vigilance and calm confidence was what had allowed her to navigate the morning successfully, and it continued to guide them now, as they passed familiar streets and yards. The woman reflected on the lessons from the morning. Courage was not about confrontation, but about presence and composure. Strength was not always about size or force, but about awareness, strategy, and trust. The loyalty of her dog had been crucial, not because it was trained to fight, but because it was attuned to. Hearn responded to her leadership. Together, they had transformed a potentially threatening situation into a story of resilience. The gang's attempts to regain their confidence had failed. They realized that their misjudgment had led to embarrassment and a lesson they would not forget. They had assumed that fear would appear, but none had. The woman had remained composed. Her dog had stayed alert. And the outcome had been entirely in their favor, quietly and strategically. They had underestimated both courage and loyalty, and now they faced the consequences of that misjudgment. The woman continued walking, gradually approaching the end of her usual route. The neighborhood returned to its regular rhythm, though those who had witnessed the encounter carried with them the story of courage, strategy, and trust. The dog remained close, its loyalty unwavering, reinforcing the calm strength that had guided them through the morning. Together, they demonstrated that true power often comes not from aggression, but from awareness, trust, and careful action. The sun now leaned lower, casting longer shadows across the street. The morning's events had passed, but their impact lingered. The woman's courage and composure had shown the neighborhood that intimidation could be met with strategy and calm confidence. The dog's loyalty had been an essential part of that demonstration. The partnership between the woman and her dog had not only ensured their safety, but it also left a powerful impression on everyone who had observed the situation. As the woman returned home, she reflected on the events of the morning. She knew that courage was sometimes quiet, strength was often measured, and loyalty was invaluable. Her dog, faithful and attentive, walked beside her, a reminder that trust and companionship could make a formidable team. The neighborhood would talk about the encounter, not because of fear or violence, but because of the example of courage, composure, and loyalty it had shown. The gang, humbled and thoughtful, moved away, aware that their assumptions had been entirely wrong. They had misjudged a person based on appearances and learned that strength and courage could come from unexpected sources. The woman and her dog had transformed what could have been a moment of fear into a story of resilience and calm authority. Their example left an enduring mark on the neighborhood, showing that composure, awareness, and loyalty could overcome intimidation without a single act of aggression. As the day progressed, the woman and her dog settled into their home, the morning's tension now behind them. The lessons of courage, composure, and loyalty were clear. The neighborhood, having observed from a distance, would remember the story as a testament to human strength, strategic thinking, and the power of trust between a person and their companion. What had begun as a potentially dangerous encounter had ended as a story of resilience, courage, and the quiet authority that comes from awareness and loyalty. The sun set slowly, painting the streets with warm colors, signaling the end of the day. The woman and her dog had navigated the morning with calm confidence, turning a moment of potential danger into a demonstration of strategy, courage, and loyalty. The gang had learned a lesson they would not forget, and the neighborhood had witnessed a story that would be shared and remembered, a story where composure, awareness, and the bond between a human and their loyal companion triumphed over intimidation.